In the Gun, episode number 46. Spring ball is finally underway. It is one of the most wonderful times of the year. We're excited. We've got some real, tangible Mountaineer action going on this week. Universities across the country starting spring practice last week or this week. It's an exciting time here, certainly on ITG. I'm Wesley Uhler with the best teammates in the business, Owen Schmitt, the Runaway beer truck, and Jed Drenning, the signal caller. This episode of ITG brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your college basketball betting this season. Get analysis of every play, every prop, and every point at BetOnline. You'll find the latest odds, bracket contests, team matchups, and game trends at BetOnline. Updated odds for everything from live games, championships, right through to the Final Four and the championship game. BetOnline is your college basketball headquarters this season. So head to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code Bleav when you sign up to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. Fellas, we got ball. It's about time.
We do.
Woohoo!
I got to point this out before we get rolling here. We got a little dose of what you got at the end of football season. I went down this past Saturday to watch my Mountain Lions in consecutive weekends. First, the girls team went previous Saturday, and then the boys team advanced to the state championship this past Saturday, and they faced James Monroe. And Owen, as you know, that was a buzz saw.
Dude, James Monroe was beastly this year,
That's
man.
a talented group of kids right there. So hats off to my Mountain Lions, first of all, but hats off to James Monroe. They put together a group of kids, and on the football field, as Owen saw and faced in the fall, and on the basketball court, as I saw this past weekend, what a heck of a group they got together there. And sometimes that's how it works in small college West Virginia high school sports, right? You get a good group of kids together, they go on a run, and I mean, it was like I said, it was a buzzsaw. That's a good basketball team they got. Hats off.
Eli Allen, man, he was an absolute monster on the field and basketball.
He's a 6'5" guard just playing single A ball in West Virginia. Come on.
that's his sport. So I mean,
with ball skills.
Yeah,
come on.
It's not.
But I'm proud of my Mountain Lions, both the girls and the boys. But sometimes you just got to tip your cap. That happened to me in a state championship against a team that they slaughtered us, and I think we were their closest game. Sometimes you just tip your cap, and say that's what happens, and that's kind of what happened to the Tucker County basketball team on Saturday. But moving on, Wes, I figured that was a connection that Owen and I had there. So
no, hey, absolutely. It's kind of fitting, right? Because it does feel like as soon as high school basketball, and now we're getting close to the end of college hoops. Obviously, Sweet 16 kicks off here before much longer, coming down the home stretch. That's when it really does start to you really turn your eye to football season again, with all respect to baseball. I know baseball, obviously, there's a lot of big baseball fans out there, and WVU, good start to the season for Randy Mazey and the guys as well. But this time of year, when the weather starts to change a little bit, when basketball goes away, when spring practices start, that's when we really start to get our eye back to college football. And obviously we've got that going on now. Like I said, some schools started practices last week, some starting this week. Everyone's kind of on their own different schedules. Spring games will be happening here, in the coming weeks, obviously throughout April. But Jed, we have got plenty to get to here.
Yeah.
So get us started here. We're recording this on Wednesday. Yep. This will come out on Thursday. So today, Wednesday, was the second day of spring practice, I believe, for WVU, correct?
Well, we're rolling into it pretty heavily. And what's going to happen is Neil had a presser, of course, leading into the spring, and that's what we're going to get into in the A block. But just like you said, Wes, what tends to happen, and Owen, you first played at Wisconsin and then transferred to West Virginia, so you get what I'm saying. If you're down south, the weather tends to cooperate a lot more. So you can plan your spring ball a lot earlier, have your spring game a lot earlier. But up here in the Mid-Atlantic region, like Morgantown, that's not going to be the case. You got to kind of push it at least to the latter portion of April. But there's going to be a lot of storylines as this thing unfolds, and as we get knee deep into week one, on both sides of the football, and even on special teams, we have some key transfers there as well. But there's going to be some very interesting storylines for us to follow, some predictable, some not. I mean, I saw an article the other day, it was more on the national front, talking about some of the key quarterback battles that are taking place across the country, Texas, Alabama, on down the line, Tennessee. And I was thinking, well, only because we were 5-7 last year. We're not part of that story, but that's very much going to be a part of the narrative in the spring. And even based on what Neil said, and we'll get into that, moving into the summer, potentially the fall, that quarterback battle. But I think you're going to see a different look with what we do offensively to a measurable extent. I think you're going to have a lot of different faces on the defensive side of the football, but there's going to be a lot for us to talk about, as if they're wherever a shortage of words, right? But on the football front, actual reps and actual football to talk about here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's great, man. I'm excited. Spring ball, all the off-season workouts, right? All the little things that we needed to work on after the season. We've been focused on them. We've been watching the film. We've been getting better. We've been training. We've been doing the drilling. We've been hitting the weight room. Back in my day, we were doing the tour of duties at 5 a.m. The glorious orange eater stories about if you were a sad sack, you had
Corky Griffith, rest in peace, by the way, Owen.
Yeah, right. I know. No more.
More.
No, that's what, if we don't talk about it, it never happened type deal. But no, yeah, I mean.
Oh, and tell the folks at home, stop right there. Tell the folks at home, you said orange eater. We got to go there.
Yeah. Well,
if you played for Rich, you know what an orange eater is. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah. So an orange eater is, the kid that sits at, on the sideline at halftime, eating oranges. It really was, it was a tactic to shun you in our off-season program, to basically say like, hey, you're a loser. You couldn't get it done today in training. So we're giving you an orange jersey to look like a little puss. You know what I mean?
That's right.
That's kind of how that whole deal went. I listen, I don't care if it's wrong or if it's right. I love it. It gives a kid an option, right? Look, man, you didn't cut it today. This is what's up. This is reality.
Yep.
Whether it was true or not, it gave that kid an ultimatum. Hey, tomorrow you need to come out and work harder. I needless to say, I had to wear one of those stupid jerseys one day, which I didn't think I really deserved, but they gave me one. You know what I mean?
When Rich gets on this show, that's a story that
dude,
telling right there.
It was whatever, but I love that stuff. But spring ball, let's get to spring ball in its own. This is an opportunity for those guys who didn't get reps during the season or last year to get the reps. This is a chance for the guys that are up and coming to get the reps, to showcase what they can do. This is a chance for the guys who played last year to correct the mistakes and showcase it again and get better, right? These are the live reps we're going to be able to take in the spring, which is going to correlate to better football in the fall. Don't waste these opportunities, because any chance you can get on the field and compete, if you take it seriously like you should, like a true competitor, you'll get better. Spring was my kind of outcoming. Was very fortunate to get an opportunity to even showcase what I could. Busted my tail in the weight room, busted on the practice field, was able to showcase, and then eventually earn a scholarship. So there's a lot of exciting time for a lot of different players on the field, and I hope everybody takes advantage of it.
Well said.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into it all here on this episode of ITG. The first couple days, all of Neil's opening comments. This episode of In the Gun also brought to you by GoMart, here to keep you going. Make sure you're signing up for your GoMart rewards, as they've got you covered all throughout the state of West Virginia. All right, Jed, let's get into it. Always part of spring ball is obviously the head coach's opening remarks. And I know you've got some notes on some of the things that Neil Brown had to say as spring ball got underway this week.
I do. My OCD kicks in when I listen to these pressers, and I think Neil's kind of structured in how he delivers his topics, right? So there's a flow to it. It's easy to follow along. So I take pretty copious notes. So what we'll do is we'll kind of break it into 3 sections, the things he talked about, and then we'll kick around each section at the end. He started off with opening remarks and then got into some things offensively. So he talked about what a strong window they had under Mike Joseph. Again, can't say, in my estimation, can't say enough good things about Mike Joseph, the second head coach of this football team. Focused on overall athleticism, across the board from a roster standpoint. He also talked about the fact that, once again, just like last summer, the rules changes that have set in with college football allow you to do more from a hands-on standpoint on the football front. Okay, even fundamentally, to work on fundamentals and things of that nature, which, heretofore in the past you couldn't have even touched any of that stuff, right, Owen? I mean, it was very limited in your access to the kids. Well, now the rules are different. So that's one of the things he talked about. And he said, look, the staff and the players are obviously very excited about it. They kind of regarded January as a new beginning. They're very eager to get last year behind them. They've taken ownership. They said, look, on no level, by no measure, by no standard, is that good enough how things went last year. So this is the first chance to fix what went wrong last year moving into this year. All right. So not fix things at large, but fix what happened last year. So let's improve from 22 to 23. And it's all going to start with this: spring goals. He talked about what they're trying to establish in spring ball. First, establish an identity. He talked about wanting to be disciplined with alignments, with assignments, be well conditioned. He wants to focus on straining, playing with extreme effort, physicality from both a blocking and tackling perspective. And obviously, you got to be smart, focus on situational football. And that's something else that they'll get into on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Obviously, he's big on fostering competition, not just for spots at various positions, but also with the teams at large, both offense and defense, and even to some extent special teams. There's more focus on fundamentals. They're revisiting a lot of that with some of the things that played out last year. They want to get better at their schemes, of course, but they want to also evaluate personnel. These guys in the program get 15 practices this spring. Now, what's going to happen once the spring wraps up? Others will join in May and beyond May. First with that portal window opening the next window, May 1st to May 15th, but even on into the summer, that's going to happen. That's just when the kids will be joining it. So I think what he's doing, he's kind of prepping the kids in the new reality of the college football world. The roster is more ever-changing dynamic than it's ever been. Those that are sitting in front of me right now at this first practice, you're going to have 15 of these. And guess what? The team's going to look different after that. And then we're going to have 14 more once camp rolls around in August. And then he talked more specifically about the offense. He said, look, the staff has been energized by the changes, and not just the change with Chad Scott, but the additions. Okay. When you look at, we got a new receivers coach in Bleav, and you also have Blaine Stewart here coaching the tight ends. And both of those are younger guys that bring tremendous energy. And he talked about how critical that's been. He talked about how Chad's embraced the offensive coordinator roles, and the guys really enjoy him. They really enjoy him being in that role. And that's something that when the announcement was made, we sat here on this podcast and we talked about that. He focused on the offensive line. He said, obviously, we know what we have coming back. It's among the best in the country in terms of returning snaps, returning starts, returning reps. So they want to establish depth and find different position fits with different guys. They're going to move some guys around and tinker with some things to give them that flexibility and that versatility. He talked about Solly Weedman and Mo Hamilton as two guys who are ready to take the next step. Maybe Dylan Ray is a guy who's ready to take the next step. These are guys like Tomas Rimac a year ago. These are the conversations we were having about him, and now look where he's at. So who is going to be the next Tomas? Is it one of those guys? So Zach Frazier will be limited. That's smart. Obviously, it reaches a certain point. You don't want to risk anything. Keep him out of at least the live 11 on 11 stuff, right? Then he talked about the receiver room. He said one of the questions is going to be who will be the guy. That is the question. And that's something we kind of wondered last year. There were times that Bryce looked like the guy. There were times that wasn't necessarily the case. Is Devon Carter going to step up and continue what he was doing at North Carolina State? So far, so good. I'll tell you what, he had a great conditioning session through the winter, Owen. But he's also had a strong start in this first week of spring ball, and he looks like the real deal. They had tremendous expectations for him. Jeremiah Aaron, Cortez Braham, Preston Fox, Hudson Clement is a kid that he mentioned for the first time, who was a walk-on from Martinsburg. Great high school player, right, Owen? He did dominant things at the high school level in West Virginia. He mentioned him. Jarrell Williams is a guy we haven't heard a lot about probably since last spring. Very talented kid. I remember coming out of high school, breaking him down. One of the interesting things, Grayson's going to be out at least probably, it looks like, for a week or so. It won't be full speed. He'll be back probably for the second week full speed. But one of the interesting things from a position switch standpoint, and this is another thing springs about, tinkering with your roster. So you got a kid in Davis Mallinger. And what's one of the things we've always talked about, we talk about Davis Mallinger, speed, unmitigated, raw speed. He's one of the most explosive kids on the entire roster. Played a lot of receiver at the high school level, was a tremendous high school receiver. So maybe it's a good idea to infuse that speed into that receiver room and threaten these teams defensively so you can kind of take the top off. Let's see how that goes. But again, he's dinged up, still recovering from the injury that he had down the stretch. But that's going to be an off-season project we'll be discussing into the summer and certainly into fall camp, because one of the knocks on Davis Mallinger, he's almost over-aggressive defensively. He's like a walking personal foul because he's so aggressive and wants to so desperately to make things happen. Combine that with that speed. Now on the offensive side, let's see how you can kind of contain that, have a more disciplined approach to it, but uncork that speed on some teams. He's out this spring, but keep an eye on that as we get into the summer. The running back room, obviously we know what we have there. I'm not going to belabor the point. We're 4 deep with 4 quality backs. How many teams can really say that they have 4 potential bell cows back there, not just potential playmakers, but these guys have all established themselves on some level. CJ will be limited as he continues to recover. They're just going to be smart about it. I think he's going to get some very high quality reps, but they're just going to be smart about in what ways they do limit him and what drills and what setting they limit him, because he's still recovering from that surgery, but he's out there and he's going through things. And then the tight end room has a different look to it. Again, Cole Taylor, the transfer from LSU, he's not just a tall physical kid with the height that makes him for a great target with target radius, but he also has the athleticism or burst to attack the seam. We haven't really seen that out of that room. And it's interesting. You have the toys with him, Traylon Davis, Will Dixon. These are the kids that Coach Stewart is going to be working with. And I think that he's going to get a lot out of that room. And that's kind of how he closed things out on the offensive side of the football. Grant Wistrom's a guy we've known since we signed him how athletic he was, but he's still rough and raw. Can he, refine his game? So that's kind of, let's toss this around. That breaks down the opening remarks, the offense, how he views things at large on that side of the ball.
Yeah, well,
I think.
Go ahead, Owen. No, go ahead.
I think those are all kind of things that we've talked about throughout the entire season that we need to improve on as a whole. Like I said, whatever, it doesn't matter what the goal is, right? The whole shebang is get better. Take these 15 practices, take them serious, and get better. Whatever you need to work on, take it upon yourself and do better. There's always room for improvement. If you don't think you can, move away. We don't need you, right? We need guys that are eager to learn, eager to listen, and eager to get better and compete. I think, like you said, the last remark from him, we want to be competitive. Make every practice count, okay? Yeah. If you're not winning the rep, you didn't get better today.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to put that upon yourself as a player to get better. Anybody who's excelled in anything understands that, right? You put that pressure upon yourself, and through your persistence and your hard work, your dedication, and you can achieve. But you have to look at that as a number one priority and push yourself to the top, because that's the way we'll get there. And with all these new additions that we're getting, it's going to be great. Now more than ever, just kind of like what you said, Jed, it's crazy. It's like every Tuesday in the NFL. Why is that day significant? Well, because that's when they bring in a fresh crew of dudes to try to, get their roster better. So this is just one of those instances where this is the new NCAA, right? This is how it's working now. So, hey, look, you got an opportunity here. You got 15 days before these other guys get here to prove to us that you're the dude still. Be that as it may, don't take advantage. You'll be here. Do take advantage. You'll be up here. So hopefully those guys get that message, and spring ball is an absolute blast and a competitive nature.
Well, it's important, right, Owen? I mean, you got to be able to hop on a moving train, right? Because you alluded to it. Jed kind of talked about this in the beginning. Like, your head's spinning in that environment more than ever before now. Your teammates are turning over, new faces more than ever before, in terms of transfers and all this stuff now in this new world of college athletics. And 15 might seem like a big number, but it's 15 practices. It's really not that much.
Man.
It goes fast. So yeah, you got to be able to hop on that moving train. You got to be able to get your bearings quick and get out there and get better and have an impact and turn some heads. And particularly, with guys like CJ, being cautious with those guys like Zach, right? That opens up the door for more opportunity for some other guys to maybe emerge there as well too. So yeah, it's an important time of year. I kind of love that sense of urgency, because again, like, it could seem like, oh, I've got a lot of opportunities here, but you better look at every day as, this is it. I got to prove myself today, because those 15 practices are going to go by real quick. I mean, we already got 2 in the books.
I'll wrap up the offensive side with this. I'll say, and this works at every position group on all sides of the ball, Owen, but just like you talked about, you need to get better. And you need to establish that you're the guy, because now more than ever, it is NFL-like in the sense that the staff,
they'll go shopping,
assessing each position group, right? And they'll come out and say, we don't know if we need another wideout. We're going to find out. And not only that, but from an evaluation standpoint, the procedure has now been streamlined enough that if you need to pull the trigger on a receiver, you have enough tape on those in the portal. You go out and get what you want those first 2 weeks of May. Now, it's up to those populating that room right now, whether that happens or not, right? So now more than ever, you dictate if you're the guy or not. Now, I would say this, on this side of the football, all things start and end with that offensive line. Their goal should be nothing short of domination. I mean, they need to be targeting the Joe Moore Award as the best unit in college football. If that's not their goal at this point, with the continuity they now have, all the reps they've logged together, and this is probably a good time to toss this in as well, guys. Both coordinators had a chance to speak. And it was interesting to listen to Chad talk for the first time with that title, truly with that title. He's had the co-title before, all right? That means different things to different people. But he's truly an OC now, in a way that he's never been before. And he talked openly about some of the things that he's still not sure about. Is he going to be in the booth, or is he going to be on the sidelines, right? But one of the things he did address was, look, from a personnel standpoint, we have to play to our strengths. We're not reinventing the wheel here by stating the fact that things will be different. When you start with 2 athletic quarterbacks, forget the 4 deep in the running back room and the studs we have there. But when you start with 2 athletic quarterbacks, when's the last time we talked about that? Having athletic quarterbacks. Skyler, right? It was before the Neil Brown era. And when you have that, Owen, you know better than anybody, as a guy who played next to one, that changes the entire dynamic of everything you do, not just in the run game, but in the offense at large. It impacts everything. So now all of a sudden, when Garrett or Nikio can keep it on his own read, wow, does that make a massive difference? What you're going to start seeing, not only are the backs popping a few more runs to the second level, you're going to see that, but you're also going to see a few more safeties cheating down toward that box to make life a little easier on a thin receiver room. Okay. So to me, that's very interesting which way we go with that. And I do think you're going to take the versatility of that running back room. There's not just depth there, but there's versatility. When you look at guys like Jalen Anderson, I mean, I remember watching his high school tape. They'd split him out wide and let him in single coverage on corners. They'd throw fades to him in the red zone. I mean, he has true receiver skills. CJ Donaldson came in as a flex tight end, receiver type, okay? So what you're in position to do, and Owen, again, let's talk about this for a second. This is all about matchups. That's what football is. And how many times do you see a deep coordinator, they're waiting to make their personnel call and their defensive call based on the personnel that you shuffle in or onto the field offensively. Okay, if you go 10 personnel, that means 1 running back, no tight ends, 4 receivers. That means the defense is going to counter with a certain personnel group. If you go 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, the defense is going to counter. What happens? Because, Owen, you did this your senior year. This is how Rich used you. What happens when you have a guy who's versatile enough to throw a wrinkle into those personnel groupings? And yeah, you might have 2 backs on the field, but the next thing you know, one snap, they might be going 20 personnel, 2 backs, 3 wides. But the next snap, it's 1 back, 4 wides because here's a back as a true receiver in a slot. Oh, and you were a fullback, but you were also a tight end. I mean, they could go from a fullback look or an a 10 personnel look, 11 even, go ram with you as a true tight end without changing the personnel. That, Wes, you don't understand this maybe to the extent that Owen does, but that drives defensive play callers mad. That's where the matchup portion of the game comes in. And right now, they're in the laboratory. That's what spring ball is for. Find out how you can maximize not just the depth of that running back room, but the skill set of that running back room. Right, Owen?
Yeah, and you got a guy, and I'm not just picking on CJ or nothing, but he's probably, in my opinion, a little more athletic than I am, to be honest. That's not believing in myself or nothing, but he truly is, just from what I've watched on film. He's a more athletic guy. So when you're able to, break those matchups with, versus they would bring on maybe 4 DBs,
yes,
5 DBs in a dime package. Now they're stuck to leaving linebackers on the field. Now we're saying, hey, look, now we got a guy in CJ. We know he can beat a linebacker. Okay. He's more athletic. He's more physical. He's bigger. He's stronger. Now we have the advantage, and we can use certain plays to manipulate where we want to go, what we want to do. So that's when it starts getting fun as an OC, when you start getting more athletic crew out on the field. And, there's just so many dynamic kind of players we got kind of coming that are going to give us those little salt bays, right? Those little sprinkle salt on it, and be able to put those wrinkles in our plays this year. So it'll be interesting to see what we can do in 15 days in spring ball, and then fast forward all the way to August and where we're going to develop into next year, the product on the field. So I'm definitely excited and interested. And we got a lot of those players, even coming into the portal, like a tight end from LSU, correct?
LSU, Cole Taylor.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he's kind of a guy who I could see too, where we could reverse that, and he could stay as kind of a 20 personnel or 21 personnel,
yep,
or we could move from, him moving into a fullback position, or maybe even put him back in like the gun position in like a Rip Max look as well. So you have so many different options.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You got so many.
We talked about it before the show. We have 2 true fullbacks in the program now that we're happy with. We have the transfer from Towson and Luke Hamilton. Colin McBee from University High School has had a tremendous offseason. True fullback body types.
Yep.
So where do they figure into all this? It's like we're going to use that word matchup quite a bit in the coming months, right, Owen? And I remember, like at Glenville, one of the things that really took us to the next level was when Rich found a big-bodied X, a big-bodied true split end in Walt Wilbon, this kid from Boynton Beach, Florida, who was big and physical enough that he developed through the weight room after a year in the program, also able to play tight end. So again, from a matchup standpoint, we could go either 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight, with him on the field, and without changing personnel groups, go straight to 10 personnel, 1 back, 4 wides, and true 10 personnel. And just like you said, Owen, when you line up an 11 personnel, well, defensively, they're going to adjust by getting a little bigger. Well, what happens when they get bigger and you don't have to change personnel, and now you're sticking them defensively with the same personnel on the field, and you go to 4 wides, they can't run with you, or vice versa. I mean, just imagine CJ being asked to pound on a nickelback in the perimeter run game. I mean, you really can't win defensively if you have this true level of versatility that we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's where the matchups really get creative. And plus, now you're not letting the substitution happen, right? You can just go. So that's where the genius of the play calling really gets crazy by the OC, where he can develop these no huddle situations with multiple looks on the field. So it'll be exciting to kind of
athletic quarterbacks.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and like what we talked about last year, no offense to what's his name. Just kidding. But hey, thanks for taking the 280 and she ain't a lady and getting out of here, bro. But what I mean is you just don't have, you're 2-dimensional. You're not three-dimensional.
Sure.
When you're talking about an RPO, you need to be a threat in the run game as well as yourself with your own feet. So this year, now we have that wrinkle. Maybe might not have the most dynamic arm, but that's not, I mean, you're playing into really what we're trying to get to originally. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And like I said, to all those guys out there, man, hey, have fun, dude, because it's a short ride, and it's a lot of fun.
The strategy, JT's a different animal.
Yeah. And listen, I'm not
Nico. And you know what? You're right. They're completely different players. But here's the idea. The idea is this: the combination of the athleticism that Nico and Garrett bring to bear that JT did not. Combine that with the potential, the physicality of our run game. All of a sudden, what that does, it has the effect of reducing the defense's arsenal to throw those advanced looks at you from a coverage standpoint.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, they can't afford to do that to Garrett. And
just got so much more to look at.
Diagnosing these things that these guys might never have to see if we run the ball effectively enough, and if those guys play a critical role in helping run the ball effectively enough.
Yeah, and I'm not discrediting JT. I'm joshing a little bit about it. It's just, you just didn't have the wheels, you know what I mean? And what we were trying to do last year with the RPO, it didn't really suit what he had to offer. It's not a real rip on him. It's just, when you're one and done, I question how loyal you were to the program or what it is. I understand that's not what college football is necessarily all about now. I'm just saying, whatever. It's on to next year, baby.
It's on to next year. And you know what? It's almost like here's part of the evolution. I see us like when I think RPO, here's what I think of. I think of a traditional RPO. It's a stationary passing quarterback who is either going to hand in the run game or throw the football if the defensive back reacts a certain way. So it's not him running. But now what happens, and JT could do that, but now what happens is this whole other dimension is thrown into that with guys who can run. Because now what you can do is maybe part of the RPO game is them running. You're not asking JT Daniels to run the ball in the RPO game. You're asking him to read and hand off or throw. But these guys could do one or the other in addition to who's JT Daniels going to threaten in a zone read, right? Yeah. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing is these guys are blocking a defender every time. Even if they don't run the football, they're accounting for a defender. And now, you know what can't happen now, Owen? Here's what can't happen. Anytime you run that zone play, how many times have we seen that backside of the play side, in this case, where you're reading at the 5 technique, that defensive end, crash so fast with a guy like JT in the game that they make the play before it has a chance to develop. Imagine if you're running a stretch play, right?
And all of a sudden I'm saying that's why I'm saying
that's not going to happen now. Now that
you got a guy who can hurt you on that aspect,
and he's a non-factor. You're right, and so there's exciting possibilities because of that. And Owen, I mean, there's just so many parallels between what you guys did with Rich. I mean, we didn't do the same thing with Rich that you did. I mean, we had a whole different animal with what we were doing.
Yeah.
With what you guys did with Rich, and I see the personnel fit with what we have. In other words, a big-bodied threat on the perimeter that could develop into something special. Look, you're not asking for 3 or 4 advanced wideouts. I mean, the plan behind this offense is to pound the football, keep the defense honest, force the defense to commit resources to the box and make things easier in the pass game. And you telling me that you don't have playmakers? Like, he even mentioned Rodney Gallagher. I mean, Chad was asked about Rodney Gallagher, and he said, "Oh, trust me, we got a plan for Rodney Gallagher when he shows up." So they're going to tinker. They're not going to ask the world of him. They're not going to ask him to be Stedman or Tavon and have 110 catches. They're not going to ask him to do that. But what they are going to do is simplify things, and at times ask them, "Hey, you said safety," and they're tired. They're tired of us pounding and leaning on them and pounding and leaning on them. You notice that safety's creeping a little bit closer to the box in that run fit. How about you just run right behind them in that skinny post in that middle quarter and make him pay for it? How about that? I mean, that's really how this is supposed to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the scheme's going to be go run at him like you're going to take his head off for the 15th time this game.
That's right.
And just blow behind him for a touchdown. So no, I mean, it's nice when you start getting weapons like this and you start getting those little intangibles that really need the collective to be able to run truly what you're trying to kind of accomplish. But we'll see what happens. And like we said, you know, these 15 days, well, now 13 days, we're going to see a little bit kind of going on. You know what I mean? We're going to see a little bit kind of happening. And obviously then we'll see some more down the line, but it'll be interesting to kind of see what develops, and then furthermore what goes on. And hopefully everybody, you know, rip roaring in the weight room this summer. I mean, that's where you're truly going to build all that other stuff he was talking about, the conditioning, the toughness, the mental toughness.
Absolutely. And I was on, obviously, who doesn't know this? On no level was I an athletic quarterback. I was a pocket guy all the way through. Here's the thing about it. Pocket quarterbacks like JT, okay, have a tendency to put you in a better play because of their overall global understanding of the offense. They're an extension of the coaching staff, all that. That's all true. But you know what they don't do? When a play is compromised and you have to go off script, in other words, an athletic quarterback like a Garrett Green, like a Nico, certainly like a Pat White, okay, you don't have to call a perfect play with them. And they don't have to get you in a perfect play, because it goes back to the old Mike Tyson adage: everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, things go awry post snap that you can't account for sometimes. Somebody might miss a block. Somebody might have a missed assignment. And when those types of things happen, much less if they happen on a 3rd and 4, how nice is it to have a Pat White on the field, a Garrett, a Nico on the field, that they didn't necessarily dial up the most ideal play on the grease board or put you pre-snap and set the table the best. But now that all hell broke loose after the ball was snapped, they're athletic enough to get you out of trouble and bail you out when the call can't. And that's what it can do.
No,
something
absolutely.
I sure couldn't do. All right.
Well, I mean, and then even to that aspect, you know, I mean, it's about picking your battles, understanding, knowing where you can go, where the seams are, what's going on. That's where a two-dimensional guy might have better understanding than maybe an athletic guy, because an athletic guy is just going to make it happen.
Yep.
He's just going to fight or flight, and he's going to make it happen. So, no, it'll be nice to kind of see what's going on. It'll be cool to see where Chad feels his groove kind of this year, as far as what he's got on the field, because it's very different from last year.
Very different.
This is very different.
When you get an athletic quarterback, guys, statistically, the first thing I always look at when we're facing an athletic quarterback, I always want to know, because I think this is a huge, huge part of the game and the impact that they don't get enough credit for, because it's kind of sneaky. How many times do you move the sticks with your feet on 3rd down? Because at least half of those are off script, just like I just described. Mm-hmm. So if it's 15, 18 times a year, that's 1.5 times a game. That's massive, massive. I mean, think of these tight games that we have. How many times? I mean, we're talking about improving in situational football. Here's a little stat for you that most people don't know. All right. Guess who ranked number 1 in the entire Big 12 last year in red zone scoring efficiency?
WVU?
West Virginia. And guess what that means? Who cares? Because they count field goals. We didn't rank that high in red zone touchdown rate. Okay. What happens when you become more athletic behind center, once the field gets condensed down inside the 20, the same type of conversation we're now having. It gives you more options. You don't have to have the perfect call. Things can be off script. You keep the defense honest, and a lot of great things can happen, just like those 3rd downs I'm talking about. When you get off script and all hell breaks loose, can you move those sticks? But how many times, Owen, do you think Pat did that? I mean, think about it. I mean, you have, like, say you have a dragon call, and the next thing you know, a dragon call is a man conversion out of trips. And the next thing you know, Rich has a dragon call on because we converted their man coverage. Well, maybe the slot slips. Maybe Darius slips out of his break, or something happens, and he gets tripped up and he's on the turf. Well, Pat is going to tuck it, make a guy miss, and pick up 7 yards on 3rd and 5. Yeah. Whereas a less mobile quarterback like me or a JT Daniels, we can't do that. Yeah. So you're more forced to call a more perfect play or set the table more perfectly. It's terribly exciting. I mean, that's the first stat I always looked at. And now I'll be looking at it for us instead of the bad guys. Yeah. I mean, trust me, I'll be tracking that. I really will. When I'm watching practice tape all the way down the line, I'll be watching for those types of things.
This episode of ITG also brought to you by our friends at Fortis. For roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, make sure you're checking out fortis.us. .com. Jed, real quick, I wanted to ask, did you understand that Salt Bay reference from Owen?
What was it again? Salt Bay?
I figured that was that was a no. Salt Bay, he's a famous chef, all right, and he's popular on social media, and he puts salt on the
That's
food.
it. Okay.
Yeah, he
I
does
like
this
that.
goofy delivery of his salt, and his nickname is Salt. He's a social media. Well, he has a lot of restaurants around the world and stuff, but he's
Now I
popular
gotta
on
look.
social media.
Now I
Yeah.
gotta look. I'm a food junkie.
Owen made that joke, and we both did the Salt Bay thing, and the look
Okay. I
on your
got it.
face was like, wait a second, what am I missing here? So I had to circle back to that one there real
I
quick.
thought he was doing a T-Rex.
It did look like a little T-Rex arms, right?
Yeah. Hey, I always tell the kids, the dinosaurs died out, right?
Oh no, here we go.
Well, their arms were too short to hug. Come on, that's Anyway, moving on.
What
joke.
else? What else do we got as we start to round this thing?
So
as we start to round this thing out here. What else?
All right, here we go. Let's
anything else you got that stood out for us?
Yeah, let's hit the defense. When he jumped to the defensive side, let's see. Okay, here we go. And again, Jordan also spoke, but what Neil said was on the defensive side, it's about getting back to basics. Obviously, we didn't play up to our standards last year. There were standards established in previous years under this staff. I mean, we led the nation in pass defense in 2020. First Big 12 team to do it since 1999. This is the same staff. So we got to get back to some of those things that made us successful. One of the things they focused on was simplifying things schematically, which we'll get into. Okay. Owen and I can talk about that. Alignment's going to be big. Communication is going to be big. That's going to be a lot of the focus early on. He focused on the defensive line. Said it's a mix of newcomers and guys that need to increase their role. Everything on defense, he believes, does start up front. We need to get back to that. That'll be a huge point of emphasis. He said Jalen Thornton's going to be limited. Lawton's going to be limited. Redwood's out for the spring. Again, some of these guys had injuries toward the latter part of the year. Some had injuries this winter. But that's the situation with those guys at linebacker. Here's where it gets really interesting on this side of the football. Lee Cove is back as the leading tackler on the team. We actually return our top 3 tacklers from a year ago. It feels like we were decimated because in large measure we were, not just by graduation and attrition, but by the portal. But we do have our top 3 tacklers back. Lee Koba led the team in tackling. He's ready to take the next step. Now, when you get into the new names, Trey Lathan, Josiah Trotter, Ben Cutter, this spring, Neil said it's going to be big for all of them because they'll get a lot of live reps. This is a position that will show a lot of improvement from last year. There's a lot of youth in that room, but there's real talent in that room. Now, an outside backer, when he's talking Bandit, he said Bartlett has had one of the best winners in the entire program, so he's excited about him. And guys, James Hurd, we talked about it after we signed him on the recruiting show. That's a name we're going to keep going back to time and time again. He is a legit edge rushing threat, and it's just a question of when with James Hurd. I think you're looking at an all Big 12 caliber player, maybe with 3 of those linebacker names I just mentioned, if not more. That group's terribly exciting. Now, in the secondary, obvious growing pains last year, but he expects that to be one of the most improved units, in part because we're going to simplify things. Once again, that word comes up. Then he got into special teams, so we'll work fundamentals, not a lot of 11 on 11, but they will have a true field goal and kickoff competition. Danny King's back, and we also have the Georgia State transfer, Michael Hayes, who did some good things down there for the Panthers. And then wrapping up, he said, this is our first opportunity to get it fixed. We're not hiding from what last year was. It starts with the 3 E's, and this is kind of an analytics thing. Efficiency, first down, third down. Those things are interlinked. You succeed on first down, third down's more manageable. Red zone efficiency from the touchdown side, like we just talked about. Explosive plays. Defensively, we gave up far too many a year ago. That needs to be addressed. On the offensive side, we need to use our ability to run the football to create explosives down the field, both in the run game and the pass game, just like Owen and I talked about. And then the other E, eliminate errors. On offense, how many times we talked about it, guys? Those procedure penalties at the most inopportune time. Yep. It's second goal at the 2. No, it's not. It's second goal at the 7. Come on, right? So that needs fixed. Those are mental errors. And it's on the defensive side or on the offensive side, it's also about avoiding negative yardage plays, whether it's TFLs, whether it's sacks. On the defensive side, it's about alignment issues, communication, and missed tackles. Now, that's how you wrap things up. So, Owen, we keep talking about this, and Jordan Leslie, was interviewed, or he had a presser as well. And he talked about simplifying things. Now, people are wondering, what exactly does that mean? Okay. Well, I think we can kind of give people a sense of the larger picture, what we're talking about. When a defensive staff says those types of things, okay, it's great to have a club in your bag for every situation on a golf course, right? It's great to have an answer at your disposal for everything an offense can throw at you. It's great. So, in other words, if you're not expecting them to motion to trips out of a heavy set into the boundary, and they kind of do, it's great to have the perfect call and the perfect check to out leverage them into the boundary and not give them that 1 foot advantage. It's great. But sometimes when you have all those answers for every possible situation, you might just be better off to stay in your base defense. You might just be better off to stay in a base coverage or a base front, because then your kids aren't thinking, they're playing. Now, on offense, I always say thinking matters. You don't want to put yourself not thinking in a bad situation and turn the football over or put it in harm's way. On defense, you don't want to overthink things. You want to react. And when you're making checks and you have an answer for everything they throw at you, yeah, you want to have a lot of answers, but not to the point that it's slowing you down. And especially when you have a lot of youth and you're asking guys to gel together as a unit that's never really played together as a full 11. Now, one of the things that was obvious to me, and I'll close with this and toss to you guys as we get a mix here, when the defensive staff talked about this, when Jordan Leslie talked about it, the thing that was apparent to me on the offensive side, what was apparent was we're going to change some things up schematically. On the defensive side, 2 things were apparent. Yes, we're going to simplify things, but there's going to be a lot of fresh faces that Mountaineer fans haven't seen. In part, the linebacker room that we just talked about, but they also talked about Montre Miller at corner, the transfer from Kent State, Keyshawn Cobb, who's going to be populating that back end at safety, the transfer from Buffalo. It was interesting that Jordan said, look, here's how I attacked the portal in terms of my needs. I told the guys putting this stuff together, I want to see the guys that react the most favorably when the football's in the air. Show me the guys in the portal that when the ball's in the air, they make a play on the football. And the 2 names that kept coming back, Montre Miller from Kent State, Keyshawn Cobb from Buffalo, they're both now wearing the old blue and gold. So I think what's going to happen is a lot of these freshmen are going to play, a lot of these transfers are going to play, and we're going to simplify and streamline things. And that's all good news. We need to get back closer to the 2020 leading the nation in pass defense than that sieve that we at times were a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. The thing to me is, and Jed, this is where there's a small dispute, but not really. We're still on the same wavelength. In my opinion, how I would coach, our high school athletes was, look, I want reactions. I don't want thought processes. I'm going to make it that simple to where it's 1 or 2 things and we're reacting. We're not thinking about what we're supposed to be doing, because everybody knows a reaction is going to be quicker than a thought process. It's just what it is. Even though they're that quick together, the reaction is going to be the fastest thing. So simplify it. Keep it easy. Keep it easy to learn so that guys coming in can learn quick. That way you get your athletes on the field, and they get multiple reps. They're seeing the looks. You're getting the reaction time to it. Yeah, there's a little bit of thought process at first, learning what's going on. But ultimately, in the end, in my opinion, I would rather have my athletes react versus think, and that's I'm not downgrading their intelligence at all.
I agree with that. I want to hear
that's just
all I meant was from a quarterback standpoint.
That's what I'm saying. That's
all I'm saying. I agree with you.
Exactly.
You don't want your wide outs or your running backs over.
And that's where I was saying, we vary slightly because we're kind of talking about 2 sort of different players. You know what I mean? Obviously, you want your quarterback to think. That's the general of the field.
In other words, I say it like this. Maybe I should spell it out more. You're right. I would always ask myself right before the ball was snapped, right before I snapped the ball, the last thing I'd ask, all right, we're ready for the snap. Is there anything I missed that could put us in a horrible situation and cause a turnover? I glance right, I glance left. Is there anything I missed? I want to make sure, because I'm the guy responsible for it, and that's it. But if it's the running back next to me, if it's the wide out, if it's the tight, you're exactly right. I completely agree with you.
And kind of it's kind of like almost what I'm saying is, how can I say this? So before my pre-snap, right? I'm thinking, obviously pre-snap, there's a lot of thought process going on.
Keys, yeah.
But I've already visualized while I've been thinking about what's going to happen on the snap of the play. So based off of 2 or 3 different movements of where I'm going or whatever it is. So basically 100% agree. You know what I mean? I just know there's some slight variations in just the explanation of what we're talking about. But I agree 100%. Make the defense easy, make it quick, make it reaction based. That's
play.
What we want to do. We attack, we gather the troops to their strength so that we can defend, and we attack their weakness as well in the same aspect. So hopefully we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to have a couple other guys in there. There's going to be some change ups on the defense, so we'll see what happens with their adjustments.
You got to strike a balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for instance, defensively, you don't want to simplify to the point that if they motion to trips, they got a 3-on-2 and quick straight. Yeah. I mean, that's what Owen and I are trying to say. Like, yeah, there's some thinking obviously involved. It's football. Yeah. You can't do it without thinking, right? Yeah. But you want to reduce it down to just let them
simplify everything.
Yeah, react. I mean, there's one quarterback
less calls,
and it's
less.
Like when you were lead blocking the outside zone, Owen. I mean, you had to reduce that down to anticipating one of 2 or 3 things happening because as you often said, you had to beat the back to it, right?
Yeah,
so it had to be pretty simple so you could just play.
Yeah, and what you're saying, and this could almost be looked at a couple different ways. So when that play is actually developing, the thought process has already happened in my mind, right? And I've run the reps so many times, I already know kind of what I'm doing. So
very little you haven't seen.
So now I am just reacting. What does that guy do? Okay, I'm doing this. What does this guy do? Okay, now I'm doing this. What does this guy do? Okay, I'm doing this. So yeah, I mean, you could say it's a thought process as well. It coincides together, but just making the game, basically understandable at the rate of speed we're trying to get these guys to play balls to the wall.
Think of the teams we struggled against, though. And in recent years, when you look at defensively who we struggled against, last year, I should say, okay, the Iowa States, the Kansas States, the teams, not Kansas State, not so much last year as in the previous couple years, but the teams that rearranged things and presented so many different ways formationally from a motion standpoint, from a shifting standpoint, because what we were trying to do oftentimes was have an answer for all those motions, all those shifts, all those alignments. We were trying to get our leverage right, get our call right, as opposed to sometimes just saying, you know what, that looks pretty crazy. I'm staying in quarters. I'm going to stay in quarters coverage. I know in quarters what I do. He knows what he does. And that's kind of what we're saying. There's times that, you have to account for what the offense is going to present. You don't want to simply get out leveraged, but you don't want to have it to the point where there's 100 answers for 100 things. And now you're like, no, wait a minute. That's one of the 62 different formations Kansas State showed us, which you can't do that, right? So if you simplify and distill it down to its essence there, it's kind of like, like think about it. You just hit the nail on the head. When you were blocking the outside zone, there was only like 3 or 4 different things post snap you were going to see, and you'd seen them 1,000 times. So you were ready for it. I mean, you're checking the front, okay? You're checking alignment. You're looking at your read key, and the ball snapped. And as you just said, you use the word visualize. You already in your mind's eye, let it play out, let the play unfold. And you're like, all right, he's stepping up, he's stepping in, he's pinching in. You knew the 3 or 4 things that guy was going to do, and you prepared for each of them because it was that basic. That took some thought, but not to the point that I'm talking about as a quarterback looking left to right and counting for 100 movies. No, I'd never expect anybody to do that outside of a quarterback, right? And maybe even in some instances, not the quarterback. But defensively, that's where we got to strike that balance. And offensively with those skill guys, you got to do a little bit of thinking. It's still football, okay? But at the same time, let them play. So if you're facing Iowa State, if you're facing K-State, or one of these teams that's going to present with all these crazy looks formationally and move around and offset their strength and have strength to boundary, and the next thing you know, you're out leveraged. Sometimes it's fine just to have some basic fronts, not kick out of them, have some basic coverages, and just let your guys play. Say, hey, my Jimmy might be better than your Joe, and he's going to make a play, even though you got a little bit of a slight advantage formationally against me here. And that's kind of what we're talking about. It's a deeper conversation. I wanted to, if we had it with fans, if we had a bunch of fans on a grease board in a room and you had a beer in your hand, I mean, we could pretty clearly walk them through what we're saying with examples, right? But we're just
we'll have to
asking
do that at some point down the line.
That's right. Yeah, we're just saying, hey, just kind of imagine what we're talking about here. You want to be smart enough to not be easy to trick, okay? But at the same time, don't trick yourself. Don't outthink yourself.
Yeah.
Especially
well said.
with personnel shuffling in and shuffling out. And what's the other thing? In this league, we always talked about it. You'll face these Texas Techs that are run a snap count up north of 90. And when you run a snap count up north of 90, what's that mean? Whether you like it or not, you're going to have some freshmen play defensively. So it better be basic enough that they can show up on campus and understand their role in the scheme and be able to log 10, 15 snaps against a Texas Tech or whoever it might be. So there's a bunch of reasons to do this.
Makes a lot of sense. And that's what spring ball's for, right? Tinkering with these things, working on these things, trying all these different things out. And that is, of course, what the Mountaineers are going through right now, all culminating in the spring game, which is on April 22nd, I believe, correct? Saturday, 1 o'clock. And should be a lot of fun to see these things start to come together. One more thank you here to our friends at Toothman Ford. As always, we know cars cost less in Grafton. Make sure you're checking out their website. They've got a great inventory tool and selection on their website. You can take a look there before you head to Grafton, and you got to get to Grafton because cars do cost less in Grafton. Gentlemen, this was fun. This was a good one. I enjoy listening to you two chop this up and kind of get into those finer details. We will have to maybe as this thing grows, we'll do some live grease board sessions at some breweries or something like that throughout the Mountain State.
This is where Owen's 100% right. Sometimes in football, we do tend to try and outthink ourselves, and I think we got a staff that's savvy enough to recognize you don't want to turn that corner. Okay, it doesn't matter. This has been said a million times. It doesn't matter what you know as a coach. It matters what your players know. And if you have too much to convey to them, and
absolutely
it's overload and they're overwhelmed, it's just going to be counterproductive.
And that's, Jed, that's something I think that most people can relate to because you've all been in the classroom with a teacher growing up who was just throwing too much at, you know what I mean? Like almost too smart to be teaching the topic that they're trying to teach, you know, as opposed to the teacher who just keeps it simple, works on a few key concepts and basics, and it's much easier for everyone to pick up and kind of roll with. I think that's something that, you know, that the average, everyone knows that from growing up.
You always tell about a week in camp, Wes, in the quarterback room, there always tended to be one guy that I kind of thought, I'd say in a couple of weeks, he's going to be in the tight end room.
Yeah, right.
Because you are kind of you know talking about and if they're keeping up, you're like, all right, he's my guy. Now he's finishing my sentences. And if they're just back there kind of just nodding, you're like, he might be
all right. You go next door. You go talk to Coach Stewart next door. Get out of here. Well, this was a lot of fun. We'll continue to update everybody on the spring practice happenings as we roll along here. But that'll do it for this edition of ITG, episode number 46. Make sure you're subscribing. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. In the Gun Podcast is where you find us. Jed's putting together all these different shorts and reels for us, doing a great job. And once we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, we're going to have some giveaways for you as well. Finally, the thing that we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. And that is, of course, In the Gun, itgfootball.com. For all of the centralized location for all of this madness that we have here on this program. For Jed Drenning, the signal caller, and Owen Schmitt, the runaway beer truck, I'm Wesley Uhler. Thanks for listening. You've been In the Gun.